We're going to bring up our presenters here for this morning panel, and I will introduce the moderator of this panel and then let her take it away from there.
Round of applause, please, for our first panel.
Come on through. Just grab a seat. Okay.
How y'all feeling?
All right, so this morning panel, I'm really excited for this one. But I'm really excited that it's going to be moderated by the very amazing Bridget Todd, sitting right here. If you don't know Bridget, Bridget is the host of a critically acclaimed podcast called There Are No Girls on the Internet. It's an amazing tech podcast. If you've never heard it, go subscribe to it, go listen to it. A lot of the main kind of topical things that are happening, this conversation we're doing here this morning on artificial intelligence, are things that she gets to talk about with many people who are in this room and beyond this room. So really excited to be having you here to moderate this conversation. And please, I'll just hand it away and take it away.
Thank you for that warm welcome. Good morning, everybody. So as Stephen said, I make a podcast about technology, and that podcast really was born out of frustration. This frustration of being told time and time again that people that looked like us did not belong centered in conversations about technology. And as we're in this moment around AI, where everybody is talking about it, either the conversation is, it's gonna be the death of us all, or it's like, we're going to be on a beach somewhere, is going to be doing our work. I see those as two sides of the same hype cycle coin. And so I'm really invested in having a different conversation and really peeling back the layers of this hype cycle moment. Who is being enriched from that? Who is benefiting from that being the story that we tell about AI? And so I would love to start by asking each of you, what is your relationship to the current moment that we're in as it pertains to AI?
Thank you. Is that on?
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you so much. I think my relationship is one of anger currently, because I guess over the last 10 to 15 years, I've sort of seen this cycle. Is that better? I've seen this cycle of talking about new technologies, automated technologies, compute-heavy technologies, in a way that is really exclusive, is really violent, and is really divisive. And so I guess I'm angry, partly because some of the hype cycle that we've heard feels very familiar to the hype cycle that's existed when big data was first talked about, when algorithms were first talked about. And so here we are again, and it feels like, have we not gotten as far as we could have? And yet then again, I look at this room and I'm actually super excited. So I'll start with that.
Thank you for that. Does that resonate with either of you, this idea of feeling anger around here we are again, but also kind of hopeful because of all of the people that we have in this space who are really challenging that notion?
Yes, absolutely. First of all, thank you all for inviting me to participate in this discussion. I'm extremely honored. Yes, I would say, first off, anger and rage, of course, and frustration. I think I'm mostly frustrated in the AI conversation because every single technology now is somehow AI. And that it's just half the time, I'm not sure if folks know what they're actually talking about with regard to the digital technologies. And then my other frustration is the fact that I don't feel like it's been interrogated enough whether or not these algorithms could ever become intelligent. I feel like the hype cycle has dragged us along into it. And so I find that very challenging. And so, I sit here as an aspiring Luddite and someone who is just really technologies are not just digital, right? And every automated system is not artificial intelligence. And can we back up a little bit and have that debate? And so, yeah, I'm rageful and frustrated, and and just hoping that the contradictions that have been heightened will bring us into a deeper dialogue about what exactly we're dealing with.
Yeah, I resonate with everything that Seeta and Tawana have said, right? I think my relationship with AI right now is trying to cut through the chase, right? I think what both of my co-panelists have talked about is this is actually nothing new, right? AI is a marketing term, right? There was big data before that, machine learning, now AI. These are all the same. It's the next step in the line of the same technologies, trying to address the same kinds of problems. And so my interest in all of this is, my background is in computer science, right? To try to understand how these systems, who's using them. So for example, right, how cops are using certain technologies to search people's cell phones, how landlords are using tenant screening technologies to deny people housing, right? How government agencies are using automated systems to make decisions about people's healthcare, right? A lot of these kinds of systems are working in the background in ways that people don't realize. And I think there's a role for all of us, especially those who are experiencing these systems, to tell stories, to make legible what AI is actually doing in a way that we can actually challenge it and take action to defeat it.
Well, to that point, a question for all of you is, when we talk about artificial intelligence in this way that makes it seem like it's not just marketing, it makes it seem like it's, hyper intelligent computer brains or something, who benefits from that? Who are the players who are materially benefiting from that dynamic?
Do we have to start in order?
No, this is jump in wherever.
I mean, I can take the first cut at this, right? Obviously, the beneficiaries of this, one beneficiary, are the big tech companies, right? And they get a lot of the attention, right? Some of the richest people in the world are obviously benefiting from that. But I don't want that to be the only focus, because it's not just them, right? It's the entire ruling class that's stood up by our system of racial capitalism, right? As I was saying, it's also landlords that are hugely profiting from this, right? Everyone who is trying to, rent seek and profit seek, companies and individuals like landlords who are trying to optimize their profits, right? Which is why they adopt algorithmic systems. For example, a system called RealPage, which is a rent setting algorithm, right? Where if you're a landlord, you're wondering, well, how much should this 2-bedroom apartment cost? You turn to an algorithm to tell you should price it at $2,100 a month, because that's what will get you the highest profits. But landlords across a place like DC, where I live, right, are all using this technology, this vendor that's also nationalized and which shares data across the district and also across the country. And that leads to price collusion, right? So if you're wondering why the rent is so damn high, one reason is because of price collusion and software and algorithmic systems setting rents for landlords and telling them what to do, right? Another example of who benefits is employers, right? Who are trying to extract every single ounce of possible labor from their workers. Whether you're a worker at an house, whether you're working in a call center, whether you're a long distance truck driver, right? All of these tools of surveillance and control, employers are trying to optimize all the labor that an individual can produce. And obviously they're doing this in a way in order to reduce their own staffing and labor costs, right? And so it's not just them, right? I could go on and on. Those are just a few examples. It's all of the people who are trying to reduce our social safety net, right? And advance austerity policies. It's everyone who's trying to expand a surveillance state, right? It's insurance companies who are trying to deny people's benefits in an automated way. It's banks, it's investors. It's basically the whole global economy, right? Every step of the supply chain trying to, quote unquote, optimize their own profits.
I think that's incredible. And I just want to piggyback on that by saying, for me, I feel like, because of the sort of 10 to 15 year perspective that I've had in the space, I feel like we now have a sort of infrastructure that makes it very challenging to not have this. It's like a drug has been released. So Amazon, very specifically, Amazon Web Services, Google, and Microsoft, I think, are sort of at the top of the pyramid chain in terms of providing the computational infrastructure for these technologies to exist and thrive. And these companies have done an incredible job of driving demand, in part because of an industrial research complex that has incentivized, in the majority, not like Harlan's of the world, but the majority of computer scientists that are trying to design in a way that benefits industry, that pushes a type of problem solving that is only tech-centered and not really thinking about what equality and justice need in this current environment. So I would draw some attention, some very close attention to those computational service providers that are sort of providing the drug for then those other people to then, go out and supply and also build an addiction to this new technology.
So, and also too, shouts out to Unilee out there. But I agree with what Seeta and Harlan said. And I'll also say that we are being coerced and we're suffering under a data gluttonous, non-consentful, coercive, violent, white supremacist extension of a system that never went away. And so you have to think of, and shouts out to Timnit Gebru and other authors who just released a paper on the terrestrial bundle, right? And thinking about how these folks who believe that there's only a particular type of person who should exist in the future, and they're trying to model technologies to mirror that type of person being a white wealthy male. And so you can't separate like the expansion of artificial intelligence, artificial general intelligence, whatever terms they use to market these technologies from the racial project that they hope to expand upon. And so while they're talking about existential risks where we could all be extinct, they're pushing forward the extinction of Black and brown people, the colonialism project. We heard the panel yesterday on Palestine and so many other marginalized countries and communities where we're not even seen as fully human. And so we're not seen as fully human, and yet we're being extracted upon to build out these databases and systems that want to see us no longer exist. And so I could go on and on. I see the mic raising, so I don't want to take too much time. But I think the racial violence that we're enduring is something that we should pay closer attention to.
And I don't even know how to ask this, so bear with me. But I think that comes back to, Seeta, your point about frustration, where I feel that part of the story we're being told about artificial intelligence currently, right now, is that these very smart, white cis men, and they're also like a very specific, like they are from the coast, they had very specific educational backgrounds. These are the people that we have entrusted to design what our future looks like, our collective tech-enabled future. But I don't want a future designed by somebody who is invested in not seeing me as fully human. And so I'm wondering, how do we tell a different story? No biggie. I know this is an easy question.
I don't know why Seeta didn't raise her mic, because refusal is deeply important in this moment. And I think one of the things and she writes and talks a lot about this. And I think we have there was an article that came out the other day. I forget which journal or whatever it came out on, but Roderick was the author of it, and I'm forgetting his last name. Forgive me. But the point is, it talked about this long legacy of refusing to be indoctrinated into ideologies and systems that we know dehumanize us, that we know don't have our futures vested in the design. And so one of the ways we do that is challenging these pervasive, dominant, negative narratives that say that these white, wealthy men who are fighting DEI, who are like, if you pull back the layers, these are the same people who are designing our futures, who don't believe that we should learn our history, that don't believe that Black people and brown people and indigenous people, et cetera, are full 100% human beings. And so now you want me to believe that the technology that you're designing for intelligence that mirrors your intelligence, which it's a contradiction, right? Anybody who could look at us and say we're not fully human is not an intelligent being. And so I'm not trusting a system that they're designing to become our intelligence. And so I think pushing back, being vocal, being Luddites, and Luddites, to be clear, they have a bad rap, right? It's like Luddites are people who don't like innovation or design, or no, they want systems that are equitable and just and not violent and not erasing people and not abusing people. They don't want medical systems that are discriminating against you. You know, when you go into the doctor and your oxygen isn't red because you have darker skin, so something is missed, or you get a misdiagnosis, or facial recognition systems that are, you know, half of the misidentification cases with facial recognition and law enforcement use come out of the city that I'm from, predominantly Black Detroit. And so, you know, I'm living an experience where I'm living in a panopticon where, and they talked about it with, real quick, I'm wrapping up, y'all. I can get super excited. But they talked about it. They talked about it last night on the Palestine panel, right? Where if your community has been so dehumanized and so disinvested in, and the world has kind of come to a consensus about that, whether you're a fully human person or you're in a shithole country or whatever, using quotes, that there isn't a lot of political will to defend your honor. So all these experiments happen on the laps and the backs of your community. And so I've been living in a city that is completely surrounded by mass surveillance, where they're experimenting on all these technologies, and we can yell very loud, but until everybody is challenging the fact that what it means to be safe is not surveillance, then we'll continue to have these types of violence and pervasive systems deployed in our communities.
No, that's great. I'm looking at you partly because a lot of the thinking that I've had around refusal has definitely been informed by the work that we did very early on at our data bodies. And I've been dwelling on both narrative and beyond narrative change in this space. And insofar as sort of the fissures in the narrative space are concerned, I tried to come up with an acronym that was like fucked.
I love when you start, when you're designing an acronym, you start with the word and then you fill in what it will stand for after the fact.
AI is fucked. So I came up with, right, and part of that.
I think that's going to be the like pull quote of the panel.
So, I think, right, I mean, yes, we have this narrative of AI being like inevitable. Yes, we have this narrative that AI is what's going to keep us competitive. Yes, we have this narrative that this technology is what keeps us efficient, right? But AI is also fucked. And so the acronym that I came up with is, and it already feels like it's circulating, is fake, right? Already there's a discourse around equating AI with fake. And I think there's actually something there in terms of sort of breaking that apart and building on that, because there is already a mistrust that exists. And I feel like that's a durable one that we could work with. I think the second one is also unnecessary. Like, why do I need this? Why do I need something that's more complicated than it needs to be? I just actually need to do something face to face, or I need to speak to a human. I need to actually relate to people in a very basic emotional sense. I think, I kind of cringe when I hear killer robots and killer AI and things like that. But that is also, I think, a narrative that can be broken apart, right? Yes, actually, AI can kill, and we should be concerned. And that should sort of motivate us to think about, well, how do we action a world that is based around peace, right? The D, I think, also is related to conversations that we've been having for the last decade plus around discriminatory, right? You just kind of started us with it with this question, right? Thinking about the worldview that comes to us. And so all of those sort of counter narratives are circulating. And I think it does present an opportunity. With that said, I think that there's also beyond narrative, some really specific domains that we could be entering into to really kind of broaden how we practice this refusal, from the personal to the institutional to broader levels that require solidarity across borders.
Yeah, I think what I worry about is, doubling down on this idea, this fact that AI is a marketing term, right? It's pushed by industry, by companies. And I worry that this idea of artificial intelligence, maybe not for people in this room, but for the general population, I think gives people really the wrong mental model about what AI is and the harmful effects that it has, right? AI is not the anthropomorphic robot that's gonna clean your lawn and do your dishes, right? But I think that's what people think when they hear the term because they see it in the movies, right? And they see it in commercials and on billboards and things like that, right? I think to Seeta's point, but they are killer robots, just not in the way that people might think, right? We heard on yesterday's panel the ways that AI can predict and target and label somebody as a suspect, right? Whether that is the lavender system used in Gaza or predictive policing system used right here in Chicago by the Chicago PD, right? Those are killer robots, right? It also can kill when an insurance company like United Health uses AI to override a doctor's decision and deny somebody healthcare, based on their own flawed AI models, right? For elderly patients who need care. That is also killer AI, but it's not an anthropomorphic robot, right? It's like a huge data center crunching all sorts of numbers to optimize people's profits. And so I worry, right, that the dominant narrative that industry is pushing around AI is actually distracting us from being able to focus on the problems that AI is causing. And so, I think in terms of the way that I approach my work and our work at Upturn, which is the organization I'm a part of, right? On the one hand, we can see all of these issues as AI issues, right? And that's one way to think about it. But fundamentally, it's not an AI issue, right? These are housing issues. These are healthcare issues. These are climate issues. These are immigration issues, right? Issues that all of us in this room care deeply about, right? But technology is now this new terrain that we all have to come together and fight on in order to get at those long-standing issues that we all care about.
Can I add something? And I just want to add to what Harlan said, and then also leveraging the term AI, it removes the responsibility of the people who are navigating these systems, and it erases the labor of the people behind the scenes who have to make sure that we're not experiencing these violent extractive systems. And so by making it this anthropomorphic, autonomous, well, maybe not, in some ways it's autonomous, but making it a robotic system that's sentient, that has some kind of conscience, that's acting alone, you remove the liability from those tech companies and industry that is pulling the strings to make sure that these systems are in our communities.
Well, that was what I was going to ask about, because it does seem to me that the way that we talk about AI really erases the agency of the people who are using AI to do XYZ discriminatory thing. And you can just say oh, well, it's the technology. And guess what? Technology is neutral. So I guess it's nothing. I guess nothing racist or sexist or transphobic or anything untoward is happening because it's the technology. And, you know, I had my own kind of personal exercise around this when I'm writing about AI, not doing it in a way that personifies the AI, really making sure that I say, like, well, the people that use it, to even, it seems like a small thing, but to me, it's like a personal act of refusal to say, I'm not going to further this narrative that it is autonomous, hyper-intelligent technology making a decision when it's really a human who is operating from the same bias that we know we are all steeped in.
Yeah, because there are many types of biases, statistical, computational, but there are also human cognitive biases that a lot of times we don't talk about. So if you're racist or you discriminate and then you're designing a system, it's not just the data you're putting in, it's the choice to put the data in that you put in, or it's also the choice to ignore the certain things that one of Harlan's teammates, they just came out with a paper that's fascinating to me about like this duty to choose a less discriminatory algorithm. And so I don't know if you want to talk more about it, but that's fascinating to me because that's using your human cognitive abilities to make an intentional decision to minimize discrimination and racism. And so anyway, I mean,
Harlan, tell us about the paper.
I mean, I think the bottom line is that the people who are designing these tools, right, are not putting in the effort that they need to even test these tools, right, to even know what kind of discrimination, what kinds of outcomes these tools are creating, right? And so I think, you know, we might talk a little bit later on this panel about like policy interventions or things that the government can do, right? I think the government really needs to put the onus back on companies before they release a product to actually check whether or not they're going to be causing the kinds of harms that we all know that if you don't look and you just, you know, create these systems and models, it's just going to replicate the existing inequalities that's found in the data that's found in our society. And so unless we put in the work and really the money and the resources to combat that, it's no surprise the kinds of outcomes that are going to happen.
Can I just want to, I feel like I need to add another layer to the conversation. It's okay. Which is just, you know, we've talked a lot about harms and people and groups and our identities. But the thing that I find really resonates with the young people that, I mean, these are primary school aged kids that I speak with about AI technologies is the climate component of it. And I know there's going to be discussion about this later, but I think that that's really important to bring in alongside of these social, economic, and racial justice questions, because even yesterday I was at my kid's school and I was with a student that was, they brought in, like one of the parents brought in some tools to, you know, learn what ChatGPT is and blah, 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 blah. You can only imagine what they were doing. But I asked her to say, like, why don't you search and see what it says about fossil fuel consumption and large language models? And, you know, it kind of came back with this really fuzzy, like it runs on electricity and power.
Convenient.
And
conveniently vague.
But that started a broader conversation to think about, like, at every stage in the development of this technology, who is extracted, who is exploited, and to what impact? And for me, when you talk about, like, so yeah, thinking about refusal and thinking about how you fight back, right? That sort of mapping of this life cycle of AI and the very different stages of expropriation and exploitation means that we have really an incredible timescale to think about and to work with, right? From where the rare earth minerals are being mined to the uses and applications that finally end up materializing at the end of this long process. And that point about the timescale of how you intervene and how you refuse is really interesting and provocative to me, because it requires not just a division of labor within this kind of community of practice, but a different way of thinking across generations. And that feels really exciting.
I mean, that's such a insightful vision that you've laid out. I'm curious for all of you, are you hopeful in that moment? Like, Are you hopeful that we will get there, that we have the tools that we will be able to make that happen?
Yes. Definitely. I mean, I feel like it's already happening just by virtue of this room coming together. I mean, I think Stephen said it in the introduction, right? Like, this is not what the room normally looks like. It is definitely not what the room looked like 10, 15 years ago. Like, this is actually really important. And, you know, I think that there are different ways of sort of imagining where we're going to be able to steer these ships, right, in the future. And I am really hopeful. I think we can do things differently than we have done with some of the other technologies and some of the other struggles around digital rights that many of us have been involved with over the years. And that's partly because we've learned from them. We've learned how to be more nimble, sort of anticipatory in how we organize. And that for me is really exciting.
To a degree. Definitely this room does bring me hope. As I sit in a city that is on like a third of the world's fresh water, and I see hundreds of millions of dollars being invested into trying to build out data centers and tech innovation centers. And I see the Israeli influence on those designers in our city. And we just had a gigantic concert with celebrities like Diana Ross and all across the world to launch our Michigan Central, which is a surveillance, data extractive, Israeli influenced tech hub. I'm equal parts distraught as I am hopeful, because what I'm witnessing is how far we have to come on recapturing a narrative. And so I think that, yes, being in spaces like this, it gives me fuel to keep going. But if I'm honest, when I get home, it's almost like, it's, how you go on a vacation, but by the time you travel back home, like the stress of traveling back home, like removes the vacation. It's kind of like that. But I have deep gratitude that I get to come in spaces like this and be with you all and have that respiriting so we can continue to do the resistance. So it's not all hope lost, but I am realistic about how far we have to come.
Yeah. I mean, in short, I would agree with all of that, right? I think, in working on these issues from a policy perspective, we are extremely outgunned as a sector, right? We're literally up against companies that have billions and trillions of dollars trying to push for their own interests. And it's going to require a lot of work to get there. So we have to have hope, but we also have to build something where we are actually connecting beyond just a small sector of people. And it's just so good to see such a large room with so much demand to have this kind of conversation, right? But we need every one of you out there to do research, to tell stories, to put the narrative out there that can counter a lot of the narratives that are dominant across our society because of what the tech industry is trying to do.
And, Harlan, earlier you brought up legislative solutions. What is the legislative role in all this? For that any of you see?
I don't know that we are necessarily here for AI legislation, right? Just to give you an example. We know that face recognition is biased, right? Because of the work of Dr. Joy Buolamwini. We've all learned that if you're not pale and male, these face recognition systems will be biased. I mean, we've all gone through the airports, the work of Tawana to make sure that you can opt out of those face recognition systems at the airport. We know that those systems are biased. However, we're not trying to regulate AI to make sure that we have a more accurate face recognition system, right? Bias is part of the problem and why the technology sucks and doesn't do what it says, but we're not trying to make it better, right? The goal is not AI legislation to have a more accurate face recognition system, especially when it's used in the hands of cops and immigration authorities, right? Not only that, I think we want to refuse. We need to ban these technologies, but not just face recognition, but other technologies. But even beyond that, we don't just want to ban the technologies. We want to defund the police, right? And what is the role here of technology and AI to get at those broader issues? And so, at least from my opinion and in my approach, right, I think we need legislation that speaks to these larger problems, these long-standing problems that can also get at the ways that AI are starting to exacerbate and make more concrete all the existing dynamics that have been around for decades, because these are not new problems, right? I don't want AI legislation just to take us back to 2018 or 2015 or 2010 before the technology came around, because we've had lots of problems before that, right? We need legislation and intervention and movements, right, that can get us beyond that, where we are creating a whole new world, right? Not just small interventions that cut out the technology piece.
Yes, and so I think one of the things that I feel like I've learned from the policy work that I've been engaged with over the years is partly what you were saying about, you sort of advocate for some changes to be made in the technological system, and that inadvertently then sort of legitimates or justifies the continued development and use and deployment of a technology. And so that has gotten me thinking in 3 different domains of where some of the policy work, sort of traditional policy work, could take place, and then where some sort of non-traditional kinds of work could take place. So I'll start with the non-traditional. One is, like I mentioned really a bit earlier, about this sort of industrial research complex. There's probably a mixture of legislative interventions as well as just plain old university interventions that need to happen to actually incentivize the kinds of research that Upturn does, for example. And so I think that we can be creative thinking about how you sort of reward that kind of work earlier on and make it less inevitable that people in computer science end up working for Amazon, Microsoft, Google, Apple, and so forth, right? Because those are the people that provide the research infrastructure, they have the funding, blah, blah, blah. So that's one area. I think the second area, and partly because we're in a teachers union, I'll just mention it, is to think outside of the technology to more broadly sync up conversations of how do we sort of legislate on this issue of persistent inequality, right? We don't actually have consensus about who does the safeguarding, how, and at what scale. And partly that's because the state, the government, the federal government and local governments have become so eviscerated and so dependent on technology companies, AI, hype and so forth, to really then sort of pick up the economy, right? The whole revolution with platforms happened on the heels of the Great Recession. And so we can see now how AI once again is being used to justify the development of industry in the United States against China or in Europe or wherever, right? And so that sort of signals to me that we absolutely need to start kind of syncing up more tightly than we have been about how do you sort of solve basic problems of inequality. One of them, because we're in the teachers union, got me thinking, right? Pensions. Not anything you would normally think about with respect to technology, but I can't verify if in the state of Illinois, the public pension fund is very dependent on the high profitability of big tech, but I would be willing to venture that it is. So if you remove this idea that your retirement security is dependent on the extreme success of a technology company, and you think about how can we be equal as we move through different life stages, right? That's a very different conversation, but that one that is incredibly important and that can do some harm to the technologies that feel like they can sort of operate in this world without any punishment. And then the third area, just to make it even less traditional, I'll just mention, is to really, I feel hesitant to say this, but I feel okay saying it in this group, is to think about sabotage. I haven't thought too deeply about this, but I have sort of postulated with I've said this to one of my kids recently, like, oh, I really want you to go out and like be a space janitor, right? I want you to be a space janitor, and then you can spy on all of those people that are doing this sort of expanding this business in commercial space flight, right? Like Elon Musk. Papa Musk is going to build a new commercial space flight company, or it has already done that, but more successfully send people out into space. So then you can actually sabotage that process, and all of the Muskites that are going to go out into outer space, you just make sure that they never come back. Okay. She's old enough that she recognizes, oh, Mama, actually, this is the job that you want, not me. But I think there's something in there that, like, we kind of need to think about, like, where are we going to seed things, in whose future, at what time? And I mean, I think it's going to take a lot more than just thinking within the institutional frameworks that we have to really reimagine equality and justice, and really think about, how do we reorder the world in the way that we want it?
I think I want to work with Seeta on that job, but I'll just say, I never thought I would be this person that ever lifted up any type of legislative anything ever. But I will say there have been some political interventions that aren't necessarily legislative that have been important to in providing clarity for the field, and that I've used in community, like the Blueprint for AI Bill of Rights, which gives you like 5 principles that if tech industry really cared deeply, they would leverage the 5 principles. And I apologize, I don't remember all of them. Like, it's like safe and effective systems. At the core of it is like consent and the ability to opt out of dangerous, unsafe technological systems. And then I would say, like, the National Institute of Standards and Technologies has a NIST AI risk management framework that does give you some clarity around the different types of biases and discrimination that are embedded in these algorithmic systems, that I think is an important study guide for how some organizations within the federal government should act. And then finally, I would say the FTC should be patted on the back, because they've been doing a lot of work to resist a lot of these dangerous systems, and they're working within the government. And then even the CFPB, the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau, and the work they've done against data brokers, right? I was getting, like, no lie, like 50 calls a day and mailings. And since they really stepped up on that, I might get 2 a week. And so, so I would just say, like, if there are, as much as I'm like, government, but if there are entities and organizations within the government or individuals that who are sticking their neck out to resist these systems from within, we have to support them. Because if we don't, we won't have people that are in the inside trying to influence these systems. And so I would just say, like, when you, and also push back when they don't do enough. It's very important. And so while that's the system that we have to navigate, we need to hold those entities accountable to the regulations that currently exist, that are not just applicable to humans, but they're applicable to humans who are innovating systems that are harming us. And so it's very important.
Yeah, I just want to plus one. I mean, the government has to step up in this area. And there is actually a lot of operating room, right, under the existing laws that we have, right? So just even at the federal level, right, we have the Fair Housing Act that broadly prohibits discrimination on the basis of race, national origin, and a number of other factors. We have the Equal Credit Opportunity Act that governs credit. We have Title VII of the Civil Rights Act of 1964 that governs discrimination in employment, right? These are all laws on the books. And even though they were written in the 1960s and 1970s, it doesn't mean that just because new technologies come along that they don't apply. They obviously do apply, right? But what it takes is government agencies and their staff and the bureaucracies having the insight and the know-how to apply those laws to what's happening in this current moment, right? In the same way that, like, discrimination testers might send a Black family and a white family into a housing complex to try to test whether or not the landlord is discriminating against Black families, right? How does that work online? And in large part, I think government agencies haven't quite figured that out yet, right? And they really need to level up, because these are broad sweeping rules that can be used to apply to tech companies and should. And so what we need is more creative enforcement actions and activities from a lot of the agencies that Tawana has mentioned.
Yeah, I want to sort of double tap on that, because something that you said, Seeta, which is that it's not currently clear who the safeguards should be and who they are. And so we're operating in a little bit of a gray area there. But something I do see in my own work, telling stories about people who practice public, loud morality and ethics around things like AI and tech harms, it does seem to be that somewhere along the line, it became the responsibility of like Black women and women of color and people who are traditionally marginalized in this space. And I have these women on my podcast, and they tell the stories of how they were pushed out of their company for raising ethical alarms, or they were threatened or harassed, or how they lost their livelihoods and now they have to do GoFundMes. And I wonder, do you see this as connected, where we've all just decided, well, the people who will actually be raising the alarm about the way that this technology can be used to harm us will be the ones who are already the most traditionally marginalized, and they will do it at great personal cost. And that's just the way it works. We'll listen to them, maybe eventually, maybe we won't. Who cares how it impacts them personally, the personal cost? And if it makes the technology safer, we might not even remember their names or their stories. Like, how did we get to this place?
We've been in this place since the beginning of time, right? And that's why I say I don't need any more allies. I need co-liberators in my life. No, this isn't an opt-in, opt-out. You have to be struggling against anti-Blackness, etc. Like I'm at this point in my life where if I'm going to sacrifice my humanity, dignity, and maybe even my life, that I have there has to be some kind of blood oath. I don't know how you want to frame it, but we're in this together or we're not in this. And so yeah, that's where I am with it. And and I'll also say, like, I do feel a stake in it as a Black woman to be part of this work for a number of reasons. First of all, like, Black people, and similar to other like indigenous migrant communities, etc., we're just now getting autonomy somewhat over our bodies. And so these technologies are being developed in a way that is trying to remove the little autonomy over our bodies that we have. And so, so I have to be on the front lines of that struggle. But you're right. I'm not doing it by myself. And if I'm taking you along and you're not a Black person, then I have to know that when the shit hits the fan, that I'm not going to turn around and I don't see you anymore. And so it's just, you have to be real. Like, you have to be real about this, because I've been in a lot of anti-racist spaces that do not challenge anti-Blackness, and it doesn't make sense to me. And so, it's just, it's where I am now, because this is life or death. It's life or death. And the Palestinian struggle, as an example, to me, that is my struggle as well. And so I want the same reciprocity in this work.
I don't know if I want to, I mean, that's I think a really beautiful point. I just want to draw attention to the people that have influenced me in the past. And I'll just say, I think that's Makani. Is that Makani?
It is.
So Makani, I just want to acknowledge your work and your contribution, because I think coming into the world of media justice as a 20-something-year-old was really formative in developing the perspective and the work that I've been engaged with. And I think that it's really important to recognize those who have come before us and the seeding and the growing that they've done. And it has really been a tremendous moment, a formative moment for me. So thank you.
Yeah, Makani on that end and Ruha on that end. I mean,
I mean, it goes back to the importance of why we need to change the story and really center these visionaries who were doing the work, and the reason why some of us are in this work and in this fight, really creating spaces where those stories and those voices can be centered. Not just like, oh yeah, we'll name check this person, they were there too, but truly centered in a meaningful way. I don't feel like we get a lot of spaces like that. And so when we have those opportunities, it just, I think they can be so nourishing. Like I'm almost on the verge of tears because we don't get a lot of space to do that. And I don't know, something about technology, I feel like it can be so ephemeral and move so quickly that you don't really get a lot of time to be, thinking about like, well, this person really contributed something. This person really made a change. This person really, changed the conversation in a lasting, meaningful way. I'm glad we get to do that.
Can we lift up resources too real quick?
Please, yeah. What resources as we wind down? What
Listen,
resources?
because
do
I
y'all
was
have
holding
for
it
us?
back, right? So I know Alex Hannah's somewhere in here, and like the AI Hype Theater podcast that Alex and Emily Bender have. Come on, like you have to listen to that. Then I now I'm doing this because Seeta did this. But anyway, I wasn't sure. I couldn't see. I was like, is that McConaughey? But I didn't want to be embarrassed. But Detroit, anyway, we'll talk. And Ruha, like, okay, I talked about like this extension of like the white supremacist project, right? And so like there's a lot of brilliant books that Ruha has contributed to this work that we're all like students of, but like Race After Technology, Abolitionist Tools for the New Jim Code. Like I had the opportunity to sit down with Michelle Alexander recently, and I'm like, have you read Ruha's book? Like, so anyway, like just that continuation of making sure we understand that this is not a new system, that this system is continuing, and that we have not fully gained our freedom, right? I talked about Timnit and a terceral bundle and that work to like really understand who these men are that want to define our future. And so anyway, there's so many books, but the final book that I will shout out, of course, my ODB people, like Our Data Bodies. And then like, I know Unilee is in the room and like the Consentful Tech work and Consentful Tech Project. And we did a co-authored a curriculum together. But finally, I'll say there's a new book, Resisting Borders and Technologies of Violence. And I know there are like several contributors of that book in the room somewhere, but Ruha was an editor on that book. And so, right? Forward, well, an inspiration to every single person that contributed. Yes. But I do want to say that like political education is paramount to strengthening our muscle against this attack on our critical thinking. And so it's very, very important that whether it's audio you're listening to, whether it's videos of these folks who have been contributing to this legacy of work or books, like we have to strengthen our muscle because this stuff is moving very fast. And if you aren't intentional about learning how these systems operate in the history they're connected to, it's easy to get swept up in the hype and not really fully understand what you're internalizing. We're at a point now where you can barely understand or trust what you see, what you hear, or the videos that are online, etc. So it's a very dangerous time. So study is going to be super, super important.
I don't want to put her on the spot, but we were at a convening recently where Ruha was called several times the Toni Morrison of our generation. And that line always got a huge applause. So I don't want to put anybody on the spot, but I think it goes back to what you were saying, the importance of having these figures that can really help us make sense of this time and not just looking forward or not just staying in the present, but looking future forward and also to the past about how this moment is not a new moment. We've been in these moments before, we'll be in these moments again. Don't believe this hype cycle, that this marketing that tells us, oh, this AI moment is so new, it's going to change everything. We have been through this before. We will go through this again. We need to go into the future, as you said, with that critical thinking lens very much on. And I guess to wrap up, is there one thing you want to leave folks with before we depart? Anybody?
Onward and upward towards co-liberation.
I think we need everyone in this room and everyone else that's not in this room, right? We need everyone to be able to build a broader movement, right? Not just within a tech sector or a tech justice sector, but really see this as integral to the broader movement of liberation, where this is one key component in which we need to be fighting.
I guess I'll come back to Detroit and the Allied Media Conference.
We miss it.
We miss you. To get ready and stay ready.
Yes.
Let's give it up for our panel. And I want to give it up to all of you. Thank you for being here. Thank you for your attention. Let's take back tech. Woo.
Another round of applause for this amazing panel. Let's do it. Thank you. All right. So I didn't do my job of properly introducing everybody that came up here. We heard the chatter in the WhatsApp group. So let me go ahead and do that real quick. Who you heard from here is Bridget, Todd, our moderator. Amazing. You heard from Seeta Peña Gangadharan, who is a professor at the London School of Economics, but a long time actually leader inside of the media justice movement, and someone I kind of came up in this work with. So loved having her here in that capacity. But for the last few years, she's been doing a lot of research around tech and working with community groups through a project called Our Data Bodies Project. And you also heard from Tawana Petty, aka Honeycomb, with Petty Propolis, formerly of Data for Black Lives and Algorithmic Justice League. And you also heard from Harlan Yu, who is at Upturn, an organization based in Washington, D.C., but that supports community organizations in understanding how to reconcile the tech issues that they're messing with. So that's who you heard from. And I think if nothing else, I hope it's obvious that even though this is a conference, gathering called Take Back Tech, it's really not about the tech. It's about the people, right? And so to that end, we're excited to send you off to get into your workshops, and we want to make sure that you know where to go. Like I said earlier, in the back, you'll see these papers with the workshops and the room numbers room letters next to them. On this floor here, on the first floor, rooms A through F are going to be down here. Rooms G through I are going to be upstairs, and there is an elevator to get up there if you need it. So when you're looking at the workshops, make sure that you're looking at the ones for this morning's session, which are about patterns. The ones for seeds will happen this afternoon, so just pay attention to that. We have a few workshops that are going to be interpreted as well. So let me hand it to Jacinta to let you know which ones those are.
So when you guys are looking at the sheets, on the left-hand side, there'll be a little T for translation. We have 4 workshops that are going to have English to Spanish translation interpretation. So you can see them there. I'm going to say the names right now as well. And also, folks, to just know, we are going to be using this space, the main hall, for a workshop. So if you're not going to be in a workshop for any reason and you want to be having a conversation, the lobby would be the place to do that so that we can respect the presenters here. But the 4 workshops that are going to be having interpretation are Surveilled and Separated, the drug war attack on families and health, Vigilados y Separados, la guerra contra las drogas y el ataque de las familias y la salud, the Radical Elder Tech Challenge, el reto de tecnología para mayores, Data Centers, Our Planet and Tech's Appetite for Power, Centros de Datos, Nuestro Planeta y el Apetito de la Tecnología por el Poder, and What Time Is It? Tech in This Moment in History. ¿Qué hora es la tecnología y la historia en este momento? The other thing, just for folks to know, tomorrow's main plenary, that we will actually have folks that will be speaking in Spanish, which means that a lot more of y'all will be probably needing interpretation equipment. So we're actually going to do it through your phones. So your AirPods, your headsets, or whatever you usually use to be able to listen, if you can bring that tomorrow, it's going to be making interpretation a lot easier. So we'll do a couple of reminders, but just if you have multiple headsets, bring one, share them. That will help us get through interpretation tomorrow. Sounds good? And after workshops, it's lunch. So lunch is going to be served in the main area, and folks can eat here or in the lobby. Okay? So thank y'all so much. Take back. Take back. Take back. Awesome. Enjoy your workshops. Thank y'all.